Namaste to all. Good evening and good day and good morning to all our audience from all over the world. Thank you very much for joining us today, and I know you're in for a really fascinating program today. I'm very privileged to have been asked to moderate this fifth session in the series hosted by Parampara, which is the Family Business Institute of India, a non-for-profit educational arm of the GMR Varalakshmi Foundation. We have a fantastic and inspiring family story from France to share with you today. But before introducing our guest speaker, I would like to invite Mr. Chairman GM Rao to say a few words of welcome. Over to you, Mr. Chairman.
Namaste. Namaste all. Mr. Anthony and Peter Leach, other members, namaste. And globally, family firm account for 2/3 of all businesses, generate around 80% of the annual global GDP and create 70% of the jobs in most countries. Family firms contribute over 80% of the GDP in our country as well. There are over 6 crore MSM in India, most of which are family owned and operated. So family businesses form a very critical element of the economy, and if they do well, the economy does well. I welcome you to the 5th session of our learning journey on a family businesses. The essential mantra of family businesses by Parampara Family Business Institute. Parampara means tradition. It is a not-for-profit initiative of GMR Varalakshmi Foundation. It is our endeavor to continue this tradition of creating awareness and learning on family governance. The purpose of these sessions is to provide a platform to impart the latest knowledge and to explore and understand aspects that leverage the best of both family and businesses. The previous series of 4 sessions saw more than 4,800 registrations with the participants from over 15 countries, with 86% of the attendants rating the session as very good or excellent. It is indeed heartening to receive such a positive feedback from various family businesses, MSME owners and the professionals associated with them for all these sessions. In the first session on 18 July, we had Dr. Dennis Jeffy speaks about his global research of 100 business families over the last 100 years. He found that generative families are built to last because they create a holistic capital, not just a financial capital. In the second session on 25th July, we had Rachel Atkins and Leigh Limpson speaks about their rich experience in reputation management of family business globally. They found that next generation are required to be careful in projecting themselves in digital media, where the potential of building reputation is huge and the risk of losing reputation is also very high. In the third session on 1st August, we had Dr. Rose Ellen Horan speaks about his long field experience in mental health. He found that fear of hope prevents people from changing because they are afraid of potential disappointment. Regenerative business families demonstrate positive attitude towards the future and towards the change and know how to overcome fear of hope. In the 4th session on 8th August, we had that Yvonne Landsberg speak about the challenges for successor and the importance of the founding family to develop a governing platform to ensure leadership continuity in family businesses. Now, in today's session, I am delighted to welcome Mr. Antoine Mayaud, a 3rd generation member of the Mulliez family that owns the successful French retail company Auchan Hypermarkets. The family is one of the greatest examples of how to successfully keep together over 800 family shareholders from across 5 generations. In the interesting conversation between Mayaud and Mr. Peter Leach, we hope to gain insights on Mr. Mulliez family's approach for developing togetherness and entrepreneurship in the family business. The topic of session is togetherness in large multi-generation family firm. Is it impossible to stay together in the long run? There is a phase at which the family and the business need to grow in order to ensure that the business can offer ample opportunities for the growing family members to play out their roles. Today, we will discover the various learnings involved in the achieving family togetherness, nurturing entrepreneurial spirit through Mr. Mayaud's personal journey and reflections. I hope that Parampara Family Business Institute with this online symposium and curated session will benefit established and upcoming family business. On behalf of Parampara Family Institute and GMR Warlex Foundation, I'm thanking Mr. Antoine Mayaud and Peter Leach for spending that time. Thank you very much, indeed. Thank you. I wish all the people enjoyed the learning session today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for those remarks and background. And so now I'd like to welcome Monsieur Antoine Mayaud from France. He is a member of the Mulliez family, as the chairman has said, and he's been a board member of their holding company for many years. The family business is one of the most successful and largest business in Europe, and he has been instrumental in designing the governance and working for many years to ensure its long-term sustainability and success. And I have to say, I think we're all really delighted, Antoine, that you're here to share with us this family's remarkable story from humble beginnings at the turn of the century. So there will be time for some questions towards the end, but I'll invite you to take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Mr. President. My very warm hello to each one of you behind the screens. I love so much your country. It would have been a pleasure for me to join you physically, but circumstances are such as they are. Still, I'm very happy to share with you my passion to keeping entrepreneurship alive inside my family, the Mulliez family. Our major company, Auchan Hypermarkets, has been going through very hard times for the last 7 years, obviously increased by COVID-19. I want to say these difficult times are a good opportunity for us, once more, to check our family resilience. Thanks both to our entrepreneurship model and to our historical behaviors and values I will tell you more about. Now, please consider what I will tell you as just one particular family and business example. It is obviously not a model because each one of us must go his or her own way. I will only try to share with you my convictions. A last precaution, please consider that what we are today is the result of how we behaved more than 70 years ago. At that time, we were a very small family. At that time, we probably went through the same breaking the rules attitude as today. So please don't say, Antoine is telling us, what he's telling us is only good for large families. No, I would probably have the same convictions. I would still today try to break the rules if my family was still a small one. As I told you, today we're a large family. Today we are 800 plus family members who are all shareholders. including G3, G4, G5, and G6. This number increases every year with the arrival of next generations as they become shareholders when over 20 years old. First of all, why do we prefer to be many instead of concentrating the capital into few lucky hands? For me, mainly for 4 reasons. The first one, because there is more intelligence in many brains and hearts than in only 5 or 10. The second reason, let us never forget the wheel turns along generations. What does it mean? It means that if we had bought our cousins' shares, in a few words, if we had fired them from our shareholding system, we would have been deprived of their children's and grandchildren's intelligences and skills. The third reason, let us never forget that innovation comes more from those being at our periphery. That is, those who are reckoned not to be good in business, who are not reckoned to be key people. If you throw the periphery away, you may weaken your creative and innovative process. But there is another reason still why I prefer the many. I'm convinced that the first way for sharing our wealth is to share it with our large family instead of concentrating it into few hands. In my family, as we are many, very few can live out of their wealth because our wealth, like yours, is invested in walls, in roofs, in machines, in inventories, in commercial real estate, etc. And the biggest shareholder only owns 1% of our assets. Moreover, very few can live out their dividends because we distribute every year only 1% of the share value. The rest is reinvested in launching new companies in order to create new jobs. Among the shareholders, I will insist on one point. There are more than 300 spouses, which we reckon to be a key success factor in our family.
Antoine, honestly, I mean, this is fascinating, and I'm sure you have everybody on the edge of their seats here, but conventional wisdom always says that, you know, you should keep the spouses out. And bearing in mind, we're here talking predominantly to an Indian audience who have a very clear view about spouses. Can you please expand that and explain why that seems to work for you when both in India and in many countries, the conventional wisdom says it won't?
Peter, in many countries, even in France, we have very, very few families who have spouses as proper shareholders. I must say there are inconveniences, there are difficulties, but we are convinced that in the balance, there are more benefits than difficulties, more joy than pain. Indeed, what do our spouses bring in? They bring in fresh air, they bring in new ideas, they moderate family fightings. Both parents contribute to educating their children with the passion of the family business. And last but not least, spouses bring their skills as managers inside the family governance. As an example, our present family chairman is a spouse, and 5 of our major companies are chaired by spouses, including Auchan, the one which is going through hard time. Thus, we break the rule, which indeed, as Peter said, says keep spouses away, because in case of divorce, it is difficult to manage. Yes, it is difficult to manage, but we have to manage it for the better benefit of all the family. Now, a few words about our business. We are involved in dozens of companies which have been successively launched by family members or acquired during the last 115 years. No company is listed except for Auchan China. They are private owned on a joint ownership basis by all of us family members and by the 700,000 employees which the companies totalize around the world. This is another rule we broke, which usually says you must concentrate on your core business. Now, a few words about my family. Our specificity is that we try to get family members as close as possible with the businesses. Whatever potential or skills they have. Indeed, today, more than 30% of us were or are still strongly involved in the businesses. That is more than 130 who are or were employees within the businesses somewhere around the world, 160 who are or were non-executive directors inside more than 100 boards of directors around the world, and more than 50 of us have been or are still entrepreneurs inside this joint ownership portfolio. This is another rule being broken, which usually says better not mixed shareholders and employees, because it is difficult in case you have to fire, for instance, one of your cousins.
So that's an interesting one, isn't it? It's very unusual, as you say, but let me ask you, Antoine, in a case like this, you talk about firing a cousin. So I guess my question is, what happens in those cases and who does the firing and what happens to that person afterwards? It's hard enough to fire somebody that you like as an employee, but a family member, it's quite a tough one. I'd love you to explain that.
Look, Peter, same answer as before. It is difficult, but there are more joys than pains in having our family shareholders strongly involved in the businesses. It is difficult, and I must say, I was personally in charge of what we could call the after-sales management of these problems. So I had to go and see my cousin or my cousine who had been fired. Very often I had to go and see her or his parents, his brothers and sisters, his grandparents, to explain that we have nothing against their child or their cousin or their brother or sister. But the problem was just that she or he didn't fit with the job he or she had. And this is difficult. I still today have some cousins who tell me, well, Antoine, 20 years ago, my son was fired. I still remember it. Well, that's life. We have to manage it.
So they give you all the difficult, or they give you all the easy jobs.
Now, let me come back to the roots of all this. It all starts with my grandfather, who, after having failed twice, eventually succeeds in launching a small wool twisting yarn company in 1905. In the year's 20s, instead of transmitting his company to his sons, he helps 4 of them, already at that time including an in-law, to launch each of them a new company. Why? Probably, I didn't know I never met my grandfather, who died before I was born, but I think probably because he didn't want them to grow under his own shade. You know perfectly this problem that many of our children have difficulty to grow under our shade. That's why he asked them to launch their own businesses. But in his case, he asked them to launch their own businesses inside the joint ownership. And still today, the 800 plus family members, we are still joint shareholders in each business. Obviously, if created or bought within the family portfolio, that means that if a new company comes inside the portfolio, instantaneously, we, all 800 plus shareholders, we become shareholders of the new company. I think this comes from our parents who left us this beautiful legacy in 1955. They wrote this very beautiful sentence for me: we want to stay together, which means all in all family members in all businesses, so as to do better together than each of us separately. That's what we found in this document dated 1955.
Okay, I mean, every consultant and every conventional business thinker would say to you, you know, the idea of having everybody as joint shareholders is incredibly hard. And in order to make, and many have failed doing that. There's lots of examples all over the world of companies and families that have failed doing that. But I assume this family must have some kind of special culture that enables a structure like this to work. And we all know that in a family business, culture will always have a much stronger impact on things than strategy or structure, because culture is the far more dominant force than either the strategy or the structure. So how does that work with you? What sort of special culture, or do you have a special culture that enables this to happen like this?
I think we have no special culture. We have our culture. I will tell a little bit more about this culture, but mostly it needs hard work. I mean, to keep a family tight together, it's just not obvious. It needs hard work. It needs hard work. Regarding our culture, it's true that it is based on a strong togetherness. It's based on this proverb you all know: alone you go fast, together you go far. And this family culture has been very much inspired by the so-called, in Western countries, the so-called Christian social doctrine, which was formalized by a pope at the end of the 19th century. The main learning about this Christian social doctrine, for me, is to encourage us to be both fair and efficient. Well, this will be obvious for you, Indian people, because it's nothing else than the yin and the yang. But for us, French people, this is very difficult to understand. And I'll give you just two examples. The first one, we're in 1961. We were 73 cousins, among whom 29 female cousins. At that time, the tradition in France was that women were not to become shareholders. They would inherit a dowry in cash. Suddenly, my uncles in 1961 realized if they wanted to give cash to their daughters, they would have to sell almost half of the family assets. So they decided, in a very practical decision, instead of giving them cash, to give them just bits of paper where it was written, you own so many shares. And I can tell you that at the beginning, their husbands were very angry because they married women with no cash. They married women with just bits of papers, which were these shares. Because obviously in 1961, they didn't know these shares would have had such a value increase for the following 50 years. This happened to be fair for our cousins and their mothers, including my mother, and it was efficient because no cash had to be diverted from the businesses, and because many descendants of these ladies eventually took important positions in the family, even in the governance or as entrepreneurs. For instance, you know Decathlon in India. Decathlon wouldn't have existed if Michel Leclerc's mother hadn't become shareholder in the years 60. A second example of fairness and efficiency. When in 1976, we decided to let all our employees become shareholders. It was a way for us to be fair because it enabled employees to benefit of share value increase. Let us not forget that it's our employees who create this value. And it was efficient because employees' interests would be aligned with family shareholders' interests.
Okay, now that's a really interesting one because we're talking to an Indian audience, and this really is very rare to find employee shareholders over here. So obviously it was a huge decision that the family made. And my question to you, Antoine, is has it genuinely, in your view, made a real difference to the performance and the sustainability of the business?
I do think so. I really do think so. Obviously, I have no way to compare because all our businesses have decided to share their shares with their employees. But what I can tell you is I'm really amazed. You know that in France, you very often have very strong strikes, workforce strikes. And I must notice that we have a very low rate of strikes. I don't know why, but probably it is because our employees are shareholders. And so they will try more than others to care for the business they own themselves. I think this is important. And I remember one of our employees who told me this very small story. He told me, well, once our manager wanted us to do something which really we didn't like because it didn't go on the proper way to increase the share value. And we went to see him and we told him, well, boss, you're doing something which goes against our interest. He was doing something which was going as well against the interest of the family. You see how powerful this can be. That's a small example. We could talk hours about it.
Yeah.
Back to history again. In the years 40s, it was the beginning of our present governance, where the three brothers, plus the in-law, would meet with my grandfather every Saturday morning, where each of them, in turn, would explain the problems and issues so as to benefit from the brothers' advices. Now, what does our governance look like today? We elect every 5 years our family council. Its main mission is to nominate the boards of non-executive directors for each company. This means that decision-making at family level is concentrated into 7 family members. All other family members, such as myself, as I retired from the family council, all those who are involved either as employees or as non-executive directors or as entrepreneurs or just as active shareholders, our role, we are strongly invited to contribute to decision-making by trying to influence the 7 family council members. But at the end, it's them who decide, nobody else.
Sorry. Okay. So they make the decisions, but how do you get appointed with 800 shareholders? How do you get appointed as a member of the 7? And once you're in the Council of 7, how does it reach agreement?
Okay, so it's very much based on common sense. That is, it wouldn't come to anybody to apply if he or she wasn't competent. So usually you apply for the job. 6 months before the election, we are asked to apply for this responsibility. For instance, last time at our last elections, 17 candidates came out. The younger one ever in our family council was 26. And the elder one, it happens that nobody above 70 applies for this family council because culturally speaking, in my family, we're obsessed by this say, leave too early rather than too late. So we have anybody can apply. Some of them, we go and invite them to apply because some of them wouldn't, they wouldn't fancy to apply for this. And we go and try to convince them, yes, you've got a good experience, you should help us. That's what happened to me. They came to fetch me while I was working in the Danone company. They came to fetch me. So that's how it works. What I can tell you, what strikes me among the 7 we have elected last time, our chairman, he's an in-law, as I told you. His wife's grandfather was reckoned not to be any good at business. He was seen as a mere intellectual. Among the other family board members, we find Jérôme, whose father was fired from one of our companies and wasn't a brilliant businessman either. And eventually he told his son who applied, he told him, never apply for this family council because they fired me, and still he did apply. We find Marion, whose father died when she was 10. We find Antoine, another Antoine, whose grandfather suffered all his life from bipolar disease. We find Ludovic, whose father fled away from our family place in northern France to go his own way. We find Antonin, whose mother has always been criticizing strongly our businesses. And we find Vincent, another in-law, who was managing director of one of our companies, and he eventually got fired, and still he applied. And still all these were elected, when very few descendants of major entrepreneurs were elected. That's where I want to come, because the wheel turns. As opposed to these entrepreneurs' descendants, those elected were not crushed by their parents. They had plenty of space to grow outside the shade of their parents who were entrepreneurs.
That's very interesting because it's often not always right, looking around the world, that the eldest son of the eldest son takes over. But that is the general model in India, and it's worked so far. But having said that, a lot of the advisors and consultants to family businesses believe that the most important thing for the next generation to have is their independence and their autonomy for them to be able to do their own thing, whatever that looks like, so that they're doing what they're happy doing. And I guess you would agree with the idea of independence and autonomy for all of the family as a mantra.
Yes, I would. But there is a particular way to stay autonomous. It's to launch one's own business. And the tricky thing we managed to do is to ask our young entrepreneurs, well, please, can we put some money in your business? We'll stay, don't worry, we'll stay on a minority position. We don't take more than 25% of our young entrepreneurs, but we would like to be on board next to you, because obviously if your company becomes a big company, it will be good for the family. So that's the way. Yes, be independent. But I think there is another very nice way to be independent, is to be autonomous inside a society. And that is, in our case, inside a family. We can be autonomous inside our ecosystem, exactly in the same way that all French people are independent inside the French ecosystem. All Indian people are autonomous inside the Indian ecosystem. We tell our next generation, please, you can stay autonomous inside our family ecosystem.
It takes a lot of courage and organization to do that, and I look forward to hearing how you do that.
So before, just back to history again, years later, in the 60s and 70s, dozens of companies were successively launched or bought inside the family portfolio. At the end of the 80s, the family went through a very big crisis. It's not a nice, it's not, everything didn't go easy in our family. We went through a big crisis, like I think in any of your families, it can happen. This particular crisis of the 80s was due to a lack of confidence from our senior founders towards their next generation, my generation. You know, when we get old, in the balance between fear and confidence, unfortunately, too often, fear gets heavier and heavier and heavier. And their fear was that they thought we would not be capable to take over. So they had decided, with the help of a consultant, to sell all companies, like too many founders do. And the big risk for us was obviously to become just nice storytellers with no business to get involved in, with no business to be proud of, with so much money in our pockets, with all the diseases which bring having so much money in the pockets, such as alcohol and drugs and etc. So with a group of 15 young cousins, we have rebelled against this decision by working during a whole year on one question: why, what for, and for whom do we want to stay together within the next 20 years? Let me repeat this fabulous question. Why, what for, and for whom do we want to stay together within the next 20 years? What was our answer after a year of work in 1993? We decided that this wasn't the end of the family venture. We decided we wanted to carry on with a large portfolio of businesses, against all rules that say you must concentrate on one. We decided to get involved as much as we could, against all rules, I told you, that say you must distinguish capital owners and workers. And we decided to help younger ones among us to launch their own companies, but, as I told you, inside the family capital, just as our parents had done.
That's incredible. How did you do that? And how did you deal with the elders when you overruled that decision? Did they stay on after that? So how did that all work? What's your view about
it? Very strangely, they applauded us because we read these decisions in our General Assembly a year after having launched this small group. And very amazingly, the very senior cousins who 2 years before had said, you are not capable, you, the next gen, when we came with this strong conviction that we wanted to go ahead, they applauded us.
So they put a challenge down, which you
yes,
and the next generation responded to in the right way.
We took the challenge, and that's a message for you listening to me if you are from next generations. Just go ahead, fight against your preceding generation. Fight isn't a very nice word, but I mean, go your own way. You will convince the elder generation because they're expecting you to do this. They're expecting you to do this. Let me come back to our decisions after this first vision in 1993. The last one was to launch new companies, and it gave birth to a first investment fund, Creadev, in 2002, of which I was the first non-executive chairman. Creadev is an evergreen fund with a no selling the company's perspective. It's now a success with 5 verticals. But it happened that it wasn't that really attractive for our young family members. They would tell me, well, Antoine, all these business plans you ask us to write down, all these processes before dealing together, all this is too long, too heavy, too complicated. So we decided in 2007 to launch a second investment fund. This one was to be entirely dedicated to our family entrepreneurs. And so far, it is a true success, given that in 10 years, 45 family members have so far created their own businesses, but inside this investing company, inside the joint ownership, with specific rules adapted to our young family entrepreneurs, particularly today adapted to the Y generation.
Okay, so what are these rules for the Y generation? What do they look like? Why are they so different?
I would just give 3 of them. The first one is that we don't take more than 25% of the capital of the young entrepreneur, so as to let him react in full autonomy. He is or she is her own boss. We only, as a family, have 25% of the capital and no more. The second rule is that we start with a small amount, that is no more than $100,000 for a start. Obviously, there may be more roundtables afterwards, but for a start, it's no more than $100,000 and no more than what the young one puts. It is, if he puts only $10,000 to launch his business, we will not put more than $10,000. It's backed to the amount he gives. And the third rule, which according to me is very important, is that he or she must accept at the very beginning of the company to be confronted every 6 weeks to a board of non-executive directors, a small board of 3 non-executive directors facing himself, who will help him, just like a mirror, help him take the main decisions. So that's how it works.
So you're very keen on this investment, even if some of them are micro businesses. What's your prime reason for doing that? What's your thinking there, Antoine?
Peter, my answer would stand mostly into 5 reasons, 5 very important reasons. The first one, I'm convinced it's the only way to keep risk-taking spirit alive within the younger generations. In other words, we try to escape from this malediction you all know, which says that the first generation creates, the second generation manages, and the third generation spends time in the Bahamas or wherever, in Thailand, islands, and so on, and collapses the businesses. The second reason, instead of having the younger generations diverge from the family business because they may not anymore be passionate about its products or about its services, they are motivated to contribute because their own business becomes part of the family business. Let me give an example. Many of our younger generations, they don't like anymore Auchan Hypermarkets, which is selling, sometimes they say, well, you're selling plastic things and rubbish and so on. We don't like this. And I tell them, well, then launch your own business and launch it with us. It will eventually become a nice business inside the family business. And you will be at the heart of it. The third reason, in a natural and organic way, the family builds a diverse portfolio of investments instead of having to hire consultants to tell you what are the good businesses for the future. I won't be friends with all the consultants who are listening to me, but still. You just have to invest in your young generation's businesses. They know better than I do. They know better than you do. They know better than any consultant what are the good businesses for the future. So just let them launch their own businesses without thinking about strategy and all that. The fourth reason, the younger generations do not have to prove they are as good as the elder generation. I told you about this. Nor compete for senior executive roles. I wouldn't have to compete with my brother or sister or cousin. Oh, we're fighting together to head such and such company. No. I will launch my own company. I will be at the head of my company. He or she will launch his or her company. He or she will be at the head of his or her company. So there will be no competition inside the family. And the last reason, by promoting entrepreneurial spirit inside the family, we promote what I call confident, active successes, instead of having fearful, passive heirs, which is the main threat in all our families. When you are just an heir, a passive heir, you will be fearful about anything, about any crisis. When you're standing up early in the morning because you're launching your own business, you will not be fearful anymore. You will become a risk-taking man or a risk-taking woman.
That's very, very true. One question that dawns on me about all of these new businesses: what happens if somebody wanted to exit? Supposing a young family member starts a business, it becomes successful. Does anybody ever want to exit? Is it possible? Is it written in that they can, for example?
It is possible. It is possible. I've just got an example. My brother, my elder brother, is listening to me right now. one of his sons launched a business with this family investment fund. And 4 years after, we didn't go together because his strategy was diverging from our strategy. And he decided to buy back the shares we had. And we're very good friends, and it's not a problem at all.
Okay, so it's possible. It's possible. Okay.
It is possible.
Okay.
Yes.
So listen, after having been doing this, you've been doing this for 25 years. Is there one key lesson you think you've taken home from all of this? Is there one takeaway that you'd like to share, or some major piece of learning that you walk away with here?
Well, all this, Peter, is driven. It doesn't come out easily. I told you, all this is driven by a strong, including and involving process, which we call the affectio societatis process. This is a Latin word we could translate by heart and business process, or another word, family caring process. This family caring process needs hard work. It needs constant efforts to communicate inside the family, constant efforts to organize whether training sessions, learning expeditions around the world, and so on. It needs constant efforts to regularly conduct individual interviews with all family members, etc. This family caring process is based on 7 choices, supposed to be impossible choices, and I'm coming to my conclusions. Do business within a family, they say it's impossible. Include spouses as shareholders, they say it's impossible. Stay in a joint ownership over the long run, they say it's impossible. Involve as many family members as possible as employees or board members, they say it's impossible. Promote entrepreneurship inside the family, they say it's impossible. Promote a diversified portfolio, they say it's impossible, etc. Let me tell you, I do think it should be impossible for all of us to do business inside our families. It is against common sense, because business is about facts and figures, when family is about heart and emotions. And still, I believe, and you believe, if you are present here, you believe that those who tell us all this is impossible are wrong. They are wrong because they just want to lead us on the easy way, because they just forget that if family and business is a difficult path, it's also the most beautiful path, the most meaningful one, in a world getting more and more meaningless, in an economic world which is unfortunately today mainly driven by quarterly report and finance.
Wow. Okay, so if it's impossible, there has to be some magic ingredients. Maybe it's togetherness, or it's something, you know, there's some kind of behaviors that have evolved in this family over many years that look like they've promoted this collegiate and trusting atmosphere. How would you describe those behaviors? What are those behaviors that the people watching this can learn from, that will enable them to sort of do the impossible as you've done?
Peter, I would think about 4 main behaviors. And these behaviors are against common sense. The first key behavior is to speak openly. Never hide anything you want to tell your cousin or your uncle. And God knows how this is difficult inside a family, to tell the truth. The second behavior is absolutely against common sense. It is to be friendly, very friendly, when the business goes through difficult times. I can tell you, last May, during our General Assembly, I told you our Auchan Hypermarket is going through very hard time. When he presented the figures, which were very bad, he received a standing ovation. He received a standing ovation. And I can tell you, he got more energy for the next 5 years than anything else. And the third key behavior is a little bit the contrary. It's to be requiring when things are going well. When things go well, it's time to anticipate the hard times which will obviously come in the future. It's no more time to applaud. And the fourth behavior, which I already told about, is to help senior ones leave too early rather than too late. Help senior ones leave too early rather than too late. My last conclusion is illustrated by this image. I will ask you to show this image showing the two horses. When plowing the land, the row is straight only if the two horses go at the same speed, which means there is no lasting family cohesion if the business is not performing. But there is no performing business on the long run without a living family heart, which means keep family and business as close as possible to one another along generations. I know all of you behind your screens are convinced that all this is difficult and vulnerable. It requires time, hard work, and courage. But once more, that will be my conclusion, the issue of having long-term, standing up families is such a beautiful issue that it really is worth it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Antoine. That's an amazing whistle-stop tour of one of the most successful and largest and probably most evolved family businesses that I've ever seen. And I think you've done an amazing job with it. Okay, we're now exactly 15 minutes allowed for questions, and we've received some good questions from the audience, and I'm going to go through those if we can take them fairly quickly. One question was, whilst almost 99% of the profits were reinvested, if there was a need to raise capital, do the family members have to contribute? And if it works like that, does some contribute and some not? Do you ever have rights issues, for example?
No, we don't have to contribute because our holdings receive the dividend from every company. The dividend which goes back from the companies to the holding is 1/3 of the profit. We leave each company with 2/3 of its profit. 1/3 goes to the holdings, and it's with this dividend that we launch new businesses, we invest in new companies, and so on.
Okay. Somebody's asked what happens in COVID, in this pandemic. Are you doing anything while this is happening, while this is going on? Are you still starting new businesses during this difficult period? Just out of interest.
Well, it's a very difficult period, I must say. The thing I noticed is that I think this is due to our shareholding, employees' shareholding system. There was a very high level of engagement during the COVID. Many of our companies decided, for instance, to sell stuffs at the door of our shops because customers wouldn't be allowed to enter the shops. And they decided this from one day to the other. They were very reactive. The thing the family chairman decided is to have a very short communication every week on Friday afternoon. Our family chairman would gather the 800 family members through a Zoom session just to keep in touch, to tell us what was happening. This, in terms of communication, was very good.
So this is how the ecosystem works. So in a pandemic, there's a lot of communication and understanding about what is happening. That's fantastic. Somebody's asked a question about the council and question, well, if you're only getting 7 members of the council, does that not create a lot of politics?
You mean being in 7 instead of being only one?
In order to get the 7, is it very political, the whole thing, to get to 7 people, or is it very straightforward?
It can happen to be political. It can, I will not say it is never political, but the years going ahead, I noticed that more and more we elect people having good competences. We don't elect anymore the son or the daughter of such and such a big shareholder because he's a big shareholder. This never happens anymore. But it is a difficult process. But I must notice that today it's becoming fair.
Yeah. Okay.
Because it's about our money. So if I'm a little bit intelligent, if I was a big shareholder, and if I was convinced that my son or my daughter wasn't the best to apply for this family board, I would try to elect a competent one because he is in charge of my shares and my wealth. He's in charge of deciding how my wealth will become better. So it's very far from politics. Sometimes, yes.
Yeah, inevitably, but it sounds like you've worked out how to get rid of that. The point has been asked by a few people about togetherness and what the family activities are. When you say you get the families together and you know there's the 800, do you have 800 people in an auditorium, or do you split it? How does it actually work, and what sort of social activity and activities create this ecosystem? Okay. And how do people, what's the atmosphere? Can you just describe it maybe a little?
So I'd make a difference between regular activities and one-shot activities. There is a one-shot activity, which is a fantastic activity. Every 7 years, we put the same question: why, what for, and for whom do we want to stay together within the next 20 years? And this leads to focus groups. Last time we had this vision process. 350 of us were involved in this process about dreaming what would happen in the years 2035 and what part of this world we had described in 2035 the family would want to take. So this is a first. It's a fantastic activity to gather, to put family members together. Afterwards, every year, what do we have? We have 2 general assemblies every year, one in May, one in December. Each general assembly is a 2 days assembly where we have usually between 250 and 350 attendees. Otherwise, we have many training sessions, such as, for instance, I launched 20 years ago a school to become a good non-executive director. So this is one example of training session. What we organize very much, which is very interesting, and perhaps some of you may have met us in India, because we went, I think, 6 or 8 times in India. I took, usually when we go abroad, We take 40 family members. Why 40? Because it's the size of a bus. At the airport comes a bus. We get on the bus and we spend a week or so in India. We would land, for instance, in Mumbai, and then visit Mumbai, visit Indian entrepreneurs, Indian families in Mumbai, then take the train to Bangalore, for instance, and then visit other things in Bangalore. And this is a fantastic thing because the group of 40, they will come to know each other very well in the bus, mostly in India, because there is a lot of traffic jam. So we've got plenty of time to talk to my second, third, fourth, fifth cousin sometimes, and to know him or know her better. The younger ones, obviously at evening, they will go to the bar, but at 6 o'clock in the morning, they must be in the bus for the next. And this is a great thing. We've been in most countries around the world for the last 30 years. This is a great activity because you can gather people who are not very much invested in the business, but they will talk with me, they will talk with other senior managers, they will talk with local decathlon managers in India or in China. And this makes a sort of a mixture, very good spirit.
So there's a lot. One of the questions was about what kind of next generation activities are there and training. I think that sounds great, and it actually you obviously learned the lesson, Antoine, that actually if you make it fun and interesting, people will want to come back. Yes. Which is what I've learned as a result of that. We have a question that asks, how do we differentiate family from business, and how can we better coexist? Because obviously your story is about the coexistence of the family and the business. So the question is, how can you better coexist?
I would answer probably by saying, please do not separate business and family. It's true that in our family, when I meet my brother, when I meet my children, very often the business comes at table on the topic. And sometimes I remember my daughter-in-law, she told me last time, well, I'm fed up, you're always talking about business. And then he eventually joined one of our companies, my daughter-in-law. And today she is the one who puts the business topic at table when we eat, you see. So I'm not very good at this. The only thing we do is at every General Assembly, there is a party at night where we come with our younger children who are not shareholders, under 20. And this is the only event we have outside the business. But we're not very good at this, I must say. We're not very good.
Okay. We have another question saying, is there a well-documented and written family constitution defining the rules, philosophies and conducts?
Oh, yes.
So it's written.
Oh, yes. And this is important because in a family, if you do not write the rules down, the family will explode. The rules must be written down. And there we're very good at it because even between brothers and sisters and cousins, everything is written. We have a chart. We've been putting it, we've got the 6th version, I think, in 40 years.
Yeah. And does that contain sort of policies around contribution to society, sort of social impact or philanthropy or community? You know, does it contain sort of guidelines as to how the businesses should put back?
It didn't, and it does. It didn't, and today it does.
Okay.
Yes.
One question that has also come up. I mean, you've said in answer to some of my questions, it's not easy, and clearly it isn't. But are there any, is there a process that deals with sort of family disputes that arise, or or are disputes sort of avoided because everything is so clear and it's all agreed in shareholder things? How does it work? Are you immune?
No. It's all matter of a huge disputes. Don't think that in the Mulliez family everything is smooth. No. Because we have this culture of telling the truth to one another. I can tell you that during our general assemblies, it's just a matter of shouting. Everyone wants to say his own or her own truth. And I think this is the best way to manage disputes. It's to let them come up, because if you hide them, then they will explode at a far bigger level behind. And because we do work with many consultants, and when they assist to our general assemblies, they would say, well, it's going to blow up. It's going to blow up this family. And amazingly, it's still going ahead.
So there's procedure, process, and people engaged in knowing how to do that and what to do in those cases.
It's very little process and it's very spontaneous. I mean, everyone wants to say its own say. Sometimes we do have a sort of consensus committee when there is something very strong between two cousins. We have in our governance sort of a wisdom committee, which would listen to the two parts and try to get them to go better together. This exists sometimes.
Okay. Somebody's also asked or made the assumption that the family live all over the world. It isn't just people living in France. And the question centers around, how do you get consistent family values? How do you share or align the values in the family with people in multiple locations?
This is a bit of a challenge, I can tell you. When I left my job, I had a 10 people team only to deal with this. What did I do during the 25 years I was at the head of this family organization? I would meet 100 of family members every year in a private interview. If he or she lives in India, I will go to India. I never receive them in my office because it's not respecting him or her. I would go to her or his house wherever he lives. And I think that's the best way to try to build this cultural cohesion. It's also a matter of training sessions, learning expeditions. When I'll give you an example, an Indian travel. We were granted by, probably they are listening to me, by the Tata family, by Ratanavan Tata. That was in Bombay in the Taj Mahal Hotel. He granted us for a very nice dinner. And then after the dinner, he told us, well, may I bring you to your rooms? And we answered, no, Ratanavan, we're not in your hotel. We're in a very, very small hotel in the suburbs of Bombay. And I remember in the water room, the water was flowing down on the floor, outside on the wall, and down there were people doing clothes washing with the water which was coming out of my... And obviously Ratanavan was shocked, but my family members were shocked as well. But thus doing, they remembered that money is money, that you must not throw money outside the window, because money has to be invested to create new jobs and so on. So I think all these activities are a way to keep this culture together. But it is difficult. It is difficult.
Okay, well, Antoine, I know you and I could discuss this for another hour or two easily, and on many occasions we have, but I have to say, I would like to thank you for your fantastic contribution to everybody today. I think it's been really insightful. I know you've written a book on the subject, and it's well published in terms of the family story. And you certainly give inspiration and ideas around the true concept of what I call walking the talk. You seem to walk the talk and actually do what it says on the tin. And it's very rare for a family to be able to do that. And one of the things that comes up for me is that there is a humility about your family, which clearly came out in your last comment. And one of the key success factors here is that there is a genuine servant leadership attitude, that you're all in this together and you're all trying to help each other and to work together to make it all better. And for me, that's a very important piece of family business thinking. And you do exemplify that whole attitude of servant leadership. Anyway, I can see Mr. Chairman has come on. I don't know whether he wants to say, I'm sure he wants to just say a few words to say thank you. And on behalf of everybody, thank you. And I'll pass to Chairman G.M. Rao.
Mr. Anthony, is a wonderful session. Really, a lot of learning for us. Really, last word, what you say, money we cannot throw window. It's a very wonderful say. Lot of learning for me and those who are participating in this. Very good learning for me. As I'm the G1, we are in a G3 now. So much of learning from our this really wonderful session. This so much of learning, and thank you very much for your spending time. Maybe next time when you come to India, be a guest to us, and and also when you come there, definitely we are coming there. We got a great partner. ADP is my partner in our airports, and now 2 French people are coming now in our airports now. One of the person is Anthony, is our deputy CEO is coming, and we got a great relation in French. This I used to be in a Saffron Advisory Board also. Next time when I come there, I will take a time and visit you. And,
yes.
Yeah.
Please.
Great learning when I will sit with you, a lot of great learning. So many points you told us, really great learning, Mr. Anthony. Thank you, Peter Leach. Really wonderful session. Because it's a practical session, practical, this one.
Okay, we'll close. Thank you all very much and enjoy the rest of your evening.